Hey everybody, what's up? Welcome to the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Hey everybody, before we get the show started, I just wanted to preface this episode by saying I know that we're really close to hunting season, and likely most of you started yesterday or the weeks before that, and we definitely are going to talk a whole lot more about hunting tactics, but we thought it was important to start the season off with an episode that really talked about when it comes to that moment of truth, what is it that you do? How do you prepare yourself for that shot? So Todd and I put our heads together, and it didn't take us very long to figure out that Eddie was our guy. And I think you'll understand why once you listen to this show. With that, here you go. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Today I have my co-host, Todd Pringnitz, along with me, and we have another special guest from somewhere in the United States at an undisclosed location. Eddie, how are you guys doing?
Doing good.
I'm doing awesome, man. I've been looking forward to getting Eddie on our show here for some time. Kind of been really good buddies with him for some time, but kind of give you a little bit of background on Eddie and I's relationship, which is a platonic relationship, by the way, before you even go there, Jason.
I was going to say, this is going to get good. Can you talk a little sexier?
Well, I don't know how many years ago it was, Eddie, or not, but like at the Harrisburg show, how many years would it have been? 5 or 6 years ago now?
Yeah, I was thinking 5 or 6 years.
We happened to be working. He was working, helping some friends out in a booth, a couple aisles down, or a couple booths down, I guess you could say. And at the Harrisburg show, it goes on for so long. After a week together, you start to become friends with all the people around you and hanging out and stuff. So Eddie and I just started talking one day, and I think at the time, I don't know if you'd seen it in our videos or something, but we kind of just had hit it off. And as soon as Eddie stepped away, a couple of his buddies came over and said, hey, do you know what Eddie, does for a living? And so they kind of got into some of his military stuff, and I was just kind of like blown away when they started telling me some stories. So Eddie and I ended up just becoming buddies and having some beers at the end of the show a few days and just kind of hit it off and became friends. And I guess for me, it was kind of like a life changer. I guess I've never really been very, very close with any particular military personnel. My family was in the military. My uncle, my dad, and my grandmother honestly said, our family sacrificed enough. You and your sister are going to college. You're not going in the military. But it was just kind of humbling to know how much one particular person could sacrifice for our unbelievable country, and nobody even knows, what these guys are out there doing. So it's kind of been a life changer for me. It's put things in perspective, and it's certainly made me appreciate our military personnel around the world. So I guess I'll just start with saying thank you again for your service, Eddie. And you've already been out hunting big game out west already, have you not?
No, I couldn't do out west this year. I did Africa earlier this year.
Yeah, that's right. You were just in Africa doing a show with, doing some filming and stuff with Respect the Game Elite show, correct?
Yeah, Elite Archery, Respect the Game. Yep, sure was.
So basically, Eddie's retired from. You did 24 years in special
23.
operations, kind of stuff that you see on TV and all these different movies and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, I did. Actually, it was 23 years, and I retired as an E9, which is a sergeant major, and then 21 of those 23 were in special operations.
So it's fair to say, I can tell you this much. Eddie's been hunting with me a bunch of times, turkey hunting and stuff, and we spent a bunch of time underground blind talking, and he's told me about a lot of the missions and operations that they were on all over the world. I mean, from South America to Africa to Europe to especially the Middle East there later in your career when things got hot and heavy over there. But just from the sacrifice standpoint, I know that you've been in a bunch of different accidents and been shot and things like that. Why don't you tell people kind of things that you've been exposed to and that your body's been exposed to in the last 20 years or so?
Well, let's see.
The list is long. Trust me.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. I've been wounded multiple times. I've been in multiple helicopter crashes. I've been, blown up, knocked unconscious, suicide bombers, that kind of stuff, IEDs. So you get rattled, but I've never missed a rotation. And it's hard on the body, it's hard on the family, but the last 18 years of my service was in one specific unit in special operations. I was gone about 10 months out of 12 out of the house. So it's nonstop. It's the part that people don't really know about, look into or care about. Work just gets done, and without people really don't understand what it takes to get that done. But it takes being gone away from the family and out of the house for the majority of a year at a time.
Well, and it part of talking about a sacrifice, not only just being away from your family, but just being in those parts of the world. It has to be so culturally different. I mean, not to mention you're in the big sandbox over there. It's hotter than crap during the day, and at night it can get really cold. And Eddie's one of the things I think that really was the biggest eye opener for me was, we've all been conditioned to expect you military special operations guys to look like Rambo. I mean, to be freaking 4 feet across, huge tattoos, the freaking the neck tats. You've seen it. You've seen this everywhere on television shows. The guys who you generally see in media talking about this are the more boisterous type personalities who are a little bit louder. But I was fascinated at Eddie's personality because you kind of have these preconceived notions of what you expect, one of these guys to be like. And dude, he's a blender. He blends in, and that's how these guys survive. Any of the guys who are 7 foot tall and scream and look like they belong in a circus show, those guys get killed quick because they stand out in a crowd. And that was the thing. Eddie's extremely intelligent, very articulate, very patient. And I was expecting like a little bit more of a gung ho, but in your career, you stand out, you die basically.
Yeah. Anybody that kind of hangs out on the extremes, be it, too short, too tall, too loud, too overt. They don't really last in the community, and the community is extremely small. But the majority of the guys, and like you said, it throws a lot of people off, and you hear all the time from people that will, because I do other things now. I teach rifle and pistol, and I do some speaking, things like that, and everybody's like, I expected you to be bigger. But the majority of the guys are between 5'9" and 6 foot, 180 pounds, very few tattoos, or if they do have tattoos, they're hidden. And the process we go through is to find the right person for the job. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're 6'2", 240 or 5'7" and 110 pounds. You have to have the right tool for the job. And so that's the process we have to go through to get to that point, to find the right guy. Really limits our pool, but it's finding the right guy. So once you get there, guys stay because the job is rewarding. There is, everything you do has a national or an international impact. There's nothing that's, broad stroke. It's very, very pointed, very focused. And every time you step out the door, it has an effect, at the national level or the international level. So you can't have, a person who, wants a spotlight turned on them. We tend to be individuals that will be by themselves, can work together in a group, don't need a lot of information, don't need a lot of guidance. Just point me in the right direction and tell me what you want and tell me what my left and right limits are, and I'll give you what you want at the end. So it's just a different job, so it requires a different person. That's all.
And just from what some of the stuff that we've talked about over the years, this is a very, very special group of guys you're talking about. I mean, the best of the best in so many different facets. because I think a lot of us, you think about Army, Navy SEALs, whatever. You had to go through a ridiculous amount of training. Why don't you just kind of touch base on that, which is part of the interesting part, because Eddie's a total gear guy as well, and a lot of our conversations and blind stuff have been talking about equipment, because oftentimes these guys are going and doing missions that have never been done before, and so literally you guys like help assist some of the companies that provide you with equipment and designing equipment for specific missions, specific types of terrain or whatever, but. Just kind of briefly, let people know the type of, the kind of training you've kind of been through, and the amount of, I guess, just vast knowledge you guys have to be the right tool for that job.
I started out, when I came into the Army, I went into the Ranger Regiment, and I spent 5 years in 175, which is the 1st Ranger Battalion. And, that was my introduction into special operations. So I started parachuting there. From there, I went into the special mission unit that I worked in for the rest of my time. And when you go through that course, it just builds off of the fundamentals that I started with in the Ranger Regiment. And I progressed into high altitude free fall jumping, tandem jumping, and then all the water work, explosive work, the counterterrorism training. The course is the initial course is about 9 months, and embedded with all that, and the counterterrorism and the close quarter combat, the shooting, the explosives, all that's embedded together. And then that gives you the building block for that phase, or that phase of my career. And then it just builds from there. You just keep adding the skill sets from there. So it never stops. The training never stops. The selection process never stops. So I to be honest, every day when I came into work, when I would put my badge on the reader and the door opened, I was like, yes, I still have a job. And at the end of the day, I would ask myself, did I do enough to keep my job? And, so the next day when I come back and the card works again, yes, I still have a job. But at any time, that could be over. You can hang it up yourself, or, they can decide that, you're not the right guy for the job. And, to be completely honest, I never worked so hard, to keep up with the train. I mean, we kind of joke about it, but, you have to work extremely hard just to be mediocre. That's the kind of environment and the guys that you work with.
The best of the best, man. I'm always fascinated. We've talked a bunch over the years, and the one thing about Eddie is his attention to detail and just determination to do everything 100%, or actually 110%, because you don't do anything 100%. But whether it's shooting a bow or guns or any of that stuff, he's fascinating to talk to, because he really breaks everything down. He's such a good teacher. I mean, that's one quality that I suck at, 'cause I'm impatient. I'm just like my parents or my dad specifically, where I'm not a good teacher at all. I'm better off just doing my own thing. But like,
Todd, you're cutting yourself way short. You're really patient.
Maybe for whitetails and talking about whitetails, but like, I remember you were here a couple years ago and showing my wife how to shoot her handgun and stuff, and it's like he just has. He has that instinct, and so it makes total sense that you've kind of transitioned into instructing and educating and that type of field. I know when we first talked, you were just getting out, and then you almost described it as a drug, because you have such a tight bond with the group of guys that you're working with, and you really don't want to let them down by missing any missions. So you mentioned to me before it was really, really hard to pull yourself out of that lifestyle. But you kind of had to, because your family was more important, and you definitely sacrificed enough. How has training helped you come out, and with the guys that you're training now and stuff? are those guys heading overseas right now, or what kind of types of people are you training mostly?
I teach rifle and pistol part-time, both through another company and on my own. And it ranges from, other government agencies, federal, state, local law enforcement, military, private civilians, corporate events. But the majority of my work is law enforcement and military. And the way I look at it is, I had the opportunity to pretty much train without any budgetary constraints. Anything you wanted to do, as long as you could justify it, and it passed the smell test for everybody that we worked with, then you could do it. And so that allowed me the opportunity to do things that most people can't do, most people wouldn't think about doing. It isn't part of their process to even think that way. So now I kind of look at it as my opportunity to give back, especially when I see and have seen for years, looking at conventional military training. The way they approach it is they teach you just enough to allow you to qualify with the weapon, so that they can say yes, you have the capability to carry it and use it, and you can hit something with it, which in military side of the house is a plastic silhouette target of an upper torso. But that isn't good enough as far as I'm concerned. The background that I have and where I came from. If you weren't able to, on the move at 25 yards, consistently hit 6-inch targets, then you're probably looking for another job. And that's just with a pistol. The rifle is even more stringent on the requirements, but it's probably an easier thing to teach, easier thing to shoot. But the requirements are extremely stringent also. So again, they look at it as, I just need to knock down the plastic. And the way I look at it is, the accuracy is everything. So you're accountable for every single shot. So if you're missing, real simply, that gives the enemy the opportunity to shoot back at you and either hit you or one of your friends. So why give them the opportunity, especially if I can teach you how to be more proficient with it, to be fast and accurate. So it's for me, it's giving back. It doesn't matter the hours, the time on the range. None of that stuff matters, specifically, or especially on the military courses, because they are going back, and and anything that I can do to pass on some of that knowledge and give back to, the group overall is what's important to me.
Well, we certainly appreciate it. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Thanks for what you're doing and what you continue to do and what you have done. Just a couple takeaways that I had, and eventually I want people to know that we'll tie this back to hunting, but it sounds to me like a couple things are pretty near and dear to your heart. And I liked one of the things that you said, because it's something that I said to my salespeople. Not that there's any parallel whatsoever between selling cars and doing what you did, but I always said to my employees that if you could look in the mirror and say, I own this place, would I want an employee just like me? And if you said yes, you could stay. If you said no, you probably should just pack your stuff and go home. And I think I kind of heard you say that, didn't I? Or some rendition of that?
Similar to that. Yeah. It's a volunteer unit. It's a volunteer opportunity. So you can walk away anytime you want. Either that you weren't performing and they told you to leave, or you said, you know what, I can't do this anymore, or this isn't the right fit for me. Because I've known, great guys that, strong as an ox, best guy ever that you'd want standing next to you, but doing the job that we were doing, it just wasn't the right fit, whether it was, a physical limitation, a mental limitation, a psychological limitation, whatever it happened to be. It just wasn't, the right tool for the job. Great person, just not the right fit.
It's at the end of the day, one of the things that I always take away from, it seems like just about every podcast that we do from the guest, is that it's the little things that matter most. Oh,
definitely. It's always the fine details. One of the, when I speak, I do work with professional athletes, college athletes, and now I do some work with high school teams. And one of the things that I talk to them about is the difference between good and great. And again, with athletics, with professional athletes and people that are trying to get to that point. And everybody thinks that difference is so great, and it's not. The difference is minuscule. The guys that make that progression, that step into the professional ranks, be it professional sports or, like for me, being a professional soldier, which is, having to operate on pretty much the same level as a professional athlete, except the consequences of having a bad day are quite a bit different. But with that difference being minuscule, the difference is that the professional can perform with no notice and do it perfectly, do the fundamentals perfectly every single time, no matter what the situation is. And the guys that don't, the guys that are willing to take a shortcut, that are willing to accept mediocrity in whatever it is that they're doing, haven't made that step yet. And again, it's only a small step, but that's the difference between the good and the great.
Well, we start talking about some of this stuff. I always go back to, I can imagine hunting people, basically. But imagine, and what he's talking about, the fundamentals, is muscle memory, building the foundation in your body where you do the same thing over and over again without even thinking about it. Because, we all experience buck fever. Imagine if the buck's carrying AK-47 yelling Allah Akbar as he's running in. That's got to be a whole different level of freaking adrenaline. How do you describe the differences between, let's say hunting, from that standpoint, hunting humans versus hunting, any animal, big game animal?
Well, it's when I'm hunting animals, I kind of treat them. I give them the same credit as a human, I guess would be the way of looking at it. So whether it's being seen, smelled, discovered, whatever it is, I'm doing everything that I can, whether it's moving slower, working harder, longer movements, whatever it happens to be. I kind of look at it as if they had the opportunity to hunt me, what would that outcome be? And that's how I kind of approach it. So when I go out west hunting mule deer, antelope, elk, some of the guys that I've been with are like, as soon as they see the animal, they hit the gas and they get on the horse and they go. And, I'm a little more methodical. I look at it and we may get all the way into, 50, 60 yards, which is, well within my shooting range. But if it's not right, then having the discipline to back out and start over again. And it's the same thing that we do in the military. You have to be able to get into the target. You have to be able to execute the target, and then you have to be able to get out of the target. And if you get in and can't execute, you still have to be able to get out. You never want to get to that point of no return where you have to commit to a bad situation, and now the odds are even or not in your favor anymore. So being willing to accept that you can't do it right now. You may have to work another 4 or 5 hours or maybe another 4 or 5 days to get that one point where everything lines up perfectly and you're able to commit and complete what you're doing. But you were talking just a few minutes ago about muscle memory. When I'm teaching shooting, I do a lot of instruction that has to deal with muscle memory. And when whatever the task is, it doesn't matter. This situation I'm talking about shooting, whenever you have to think about the process that you're trying to execute, you go into you're no longer multitasking. You go into a very sequential pattern of thinking. So you have to do the first part, which then leads you to the second part, which leads you to the third part, which leads you to the fourth part. And so if you think of those as quarter of a second time frames, it stretches out the time it takes you to execute the shot. But if you can do all those subtasks at the same time or near simultaneously without thinking about it because it's muscle memory, then it gets you to the point of shooting faster.
Just for layman's terms, what he's talking about in the bow world, this is the time it takes you to come to full draw, get your grip right, get your kisser button or get your hand settled into your face, getting your peep aligned, making sure you're level, making sure you're on the right sight pin, what your distance is, and being able to do all of that without even thinking about it.
Right. So a real simple analogy, pretty much everybody drives a car. Do you look at, when you put the seatbelt on, do you look at the seatbelt?
No. You know where that dang buckle is within a quarter of an inch just by reach. And
why do you know that? Because you have done that over and over and over and over and over. Same as, you run out of the house, you got your keys in your hand, you got coffee, you're on the phone, you hop in the car. Do you look at the ignition when you put the keys in? Probably not. Then as you're backing out, you're reaching over and putting on the seatbelt, and you never look at that either because you've done it so many times. So you just stacked all those tasks into one motion, into a fraction of a second, and didn't have to think about doing it. So that's how, I approach shooting. And, you were talking about the process of executing a bow shot. The fundamentals, be it rifle, pistol, archery, whatever it is, the fundamentals are pretty much the same. So those things transfer back and forth. And I've been able to do that and become a better archer, better at long range, and a better shooter. If I have the option, I prefer not to shoot at longer ranges. I'll work harder to get in closer, but if I'm only, given a certain opportunity, I can stretch it out. But all that goes back to the fundamentals. And again, being able to execute the fundamentals on command perfectly, without thinking about it, without screwing it up, and being successful. That's always the key, is going back to the fundamentals.
Now, when I'm going to give you a life lesson I learned many, many years ago. It falls right into this. And I was hunting in Michigan, bow hunting, and I had a buck, a really nice buck, 140-inch 8-pointer, big deer, biggest buck I ever saw in Michigan while hunting there in 16 years. I'll put it that way. Came into my setup at 35 yards and bedded down, and I had to wait him out. So I did. He walked away. I grunted at him. He came running in. When I came to full draw, I didn't get settled in before he locked up right underneath my stand. So I had to sit there and look at him at 5 yards where he was frozen. And I was at full draw with my hand off my face, nothing aligned, and I had to sit and watch him. And if I would have moved, just moved my hand, I would have probably blown him out. I ended up blowing the whole situation because of inexperience and the fact that I wasn't prepared. But that was like one of those lessons I learned where I was like, all right, from now on, I'm going to draw my bow every single time with my hand to my face, my peep sight to my eye, and not go through any second or third movements. And Eddie, you've watched probably different guys on the shooting line at some of these archery shoots too. I watch some of these archers draw their bow back, and I think to myself, you're going to seriously take that long to get ready for a shot and you're 30 feet up in a tree or 20 feet up in a tree with a big deer standing by you. Some of these guys come back and they they flex 4 times, they move the arm out twice, they get, it's like, that is not hunting. And so, like, I kind of adapted along the way. I didn't have any teachers. My dad wasn't an archer or anything. So I just adapted everything toward hunting along the way and just kind of trained myself. But that kind of goes along with the line of what you're talking about is, being efficient in what you're doing. Where do you draw the line between fundamentals and adapting to your own style? That's where I have had a lot of guys watch me shoot my bow before and say, "Oh man, you should do this." And I'm like, "No, this is the way I've learned. I'm programmed. I'm really good at hunting. I don't really care about the range that much." But like for yourself, when you're going through all this training and stuff, there's got to be that's a lot of these the fundamentals. When do you make them personal, or when do you kind of sway to say, "Well, I can shoot better like this"? I mean, what do you trust yourself like that?
Well, the fundamentals are pretty much the same. It's how you adapt them to you and the situation that you're working in. Whether it's your physical limitations, injuries, whatever it happens to be, or it's, strictly like you're talking about strictly for hunting. We use a saying, it's called train like you fight. So when I'm teaching, we'll start with pistol. When I'm teaching pistol, it doesn't matter if I'm shooting slow fire, which is single individual perfectly aimed shots, or if I'm shooting fast and shooting multiple targets. I train the same way for both, so that when the stress level goes up, whether it's for real or it's a competition or the timer's on me, whatever it is, I'm not trying to perform a task that I've never focused on. So even when I'm shooting slow fire, I'm moving extremely fast until it comes time to shoot. And when I'm shooting a time fire or, a competition or something like that, I'm still moving fast until it's time to shoot. So the same, when you get into archery, you got the guys that are primarily, competition guys. So they all have a routine that they go through, which is part of their mental process to set their body up for peak performance. And you do the same thing in a tree, but you've adapted to that because you want to peak at the time that you're executing the shot. And they do the same thing. And if you were to time them from the time they make the decision to begin the draw to they execute the shot, most of them are plus or minus probably 2-3 seconds every single time that they shoot. But again, the guys that make the transition from target competition only and hunting, they still have the same mental processes, but they train a little bit differently for the hunting side of it. They built the muscle memory on the target to be able to execute, but they should have trained for hunting. Now, again, that's two different styles, so that it doesn't really fit the way that I shoot or how you're talking about how you've adapted to shoot. But if they can make the jump back and forth, then that's okay. But I'm sure there are plenty of them, just like you were talking about when you got caught with your hand away from your face. I'm sure there have been a few of them that have found themselves not being able to execute the shot when they normally do because the animal caught them, or they got caught at full draw and they're ready to execute it, but the animal doesn't give them the opportunity, and then they have to drag out 15, 20, 30, 45 seconds, and that screws things up for them. You've
actually hunted with quite a few of top shooters. I mean, I think you were just in Africa with a couple of guys who are freaking stud shooters, are you?
They weren't competition guys. All the guys could shoot, no doubt. But I have had the opportunity to hunt with some guys that are competition guys when I've been out west hunting elk and mule deer, and they're able to do the transition back and forth. They either use competition and they use a hinge or a thumb release, and they also hunt with the same kind of release. So I guess that makes the bridge for them. One of the guys that I hunt with, he shoots target with a index finger, like a regular release that you use for hunting, and everybody gives him crap for it. But then he's the one standing on the podium at the end of the day. But he he's a guy he's a tinkerer. He's very methodical. He's religious about shooting. Every day he's sending arrows downrange. Doesn't matter what the weather is. And he lives out west, so it's minus 30 and the wind's blowing, and he don't care. He's out there shooting.
No, and
but he
for
does
anybody, for you bow hunter guys out there, Eddie and these guys are killing animals out over 100 yards in certain cases, primarily out west. But like that's the kind of level of accuracy you guys are able to carry out 100 plus yards. And I've seen it firsthand. You can hold it in a pretty small circle out at that distance, can you not?
Yeah, I can. I'm pretty solid with about maybe 5-inch group at 100 yards.
So that's a whole different level of accuracy, and we've talked about it a bunch. But yeah, as soon as you start getting out those distances, you're able to just pick apart your shooting because you're noticing every little flaw. And I think that is part of long distance shooting for me that I enjoy. Is it just it amplifies your mistakes essentially, so you can really, really key in on your form, and it makes those 20, 30-yard shots seem like a drop in the bucket. But of all the guys you've hunted with, from the target shooting, I just have never been into target shooting. I did a couple leagues when I was growing up. It just wasn't my thing. I enjoy shooting 3D targets, but I'd rather shoot in my backyard and duplicate a hunting situation and move targets around and shoot one arrow at a time and stuff like that. But in general, those guys who have gone through an insane amount of bow shooting, I mean, anybody who's doing target puts in some serious arrow time. Do you think it's a benefit or a downfall when it comes to hunting situations?
I think it's a benefit. Anytime you can get behind the bow and work through that shot execution, even if it's only one arrow a day, but it's accuracy over speed any day. So anytime you can get behind it and get one arrow off, or maybe get 2 arrows off, 5 arrows off, whatever it is, but it's not, I'm going to get a warm up in every single time you shoot. It's for the money at that point. And they don't go out and say, I need to go do 15 minutes of warm up. Let me do 30 or 40 arrows. Every time they pull the trigger, they're trying to put the arrow in the center of the dot. So it's the right mindset. They just, you can't hunt animals all year round. So whether it's 3D targets or you're shooting spots on an indoor league or whatever it happens to be, it all becomes a competition, whether it's, you against the target, you against the guy to your left and right, or you against the animal. And it's measured in one arrow. So you can't miss the opportunity for the one arrow. So every time they shoot that very first arrow, honestly, is the most important one that you have. When I'm doing pistol and rifle work, the first string of the day is the most important one. That's when you're cold, you just rolled out of bed, you strap the guns on, load up the magazines, and go shoot, because that shows you where you are right now, cold, with no warm-up. So how I explain it to guys is, under stress, you don't magically elevate yourself to perfection. Things go downhill really fast. So and there will be a degradation for everybody, but if you hold yourself to a higher standard and you keep pushing that standard up when there is the degradation in capabilities, hopefully it's still far superior to whatever your adversary has, be it a person or an animal. And that first string shows you where you're at, cold, no warm up, and that is the best you can be expected to perform under stress. And that's just kind of like a measuring tape for you.
Sure.
So you get up, you don't get any coffee, just go grab your bow, whether it's 20 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards, whatever it is, knock an arrow, squeeze one off. Under stress, that's the best you can be able to expect to perform. So if you can elevate, that capability, then, your performance improves overall. The higher you are able to take that.
Can I ask you a quick question, Eddie? With respect to, you said elevating your performance. If you're not that guy who steps out on their deck, okay, let's just say it. I'm not that guy, so I probably wouldn't make the team for you at least. How is it that you would get better at that? Is it all mental? Is it more muscle memory? Is it a combination of the two, or is there more to it than what I've just mentioned?
I think it's a combination. Shooting in general, I think, is about 90% mental and 10% physical. You have to have the ability to draw the bow. You have to have the ability to, hold it fairly steady and then squeeze through the shot. But the mental process to be able to execute the shot, to understand what the bow is doing, what the arrow is doing, that's the mental side of it. So again, like I said, the fundamentals, it transfers back and forth between bow and gun, rifle, and all that stuff. There's a couple things, there's a couple things you have to understand on the mental side of it, and that is that you can't stop the pin from moving. So as you come to full draw, I don't care how many arrows you shot, there's going to be some movement in the pin. The better your fundamentals are, the better your muscle memory, your muscle tone, your functional muscle to draw the bow and shoot. The better that is, the smaller that wobble area is. And your mind is telling you that the thing is moving, so I need to make it go off now as you see it pass through the center of the bull or over that spot on the animal. But you can't stop it from moving. The problem is that when you say I need to make it go off now, it takes roughly a quarter of a second for that message to get to your finger from your brain. So the dot or the pin has already moved at this point. But if you take that on command kind of mindset out of it, like I need to make it go off now, where you're trying to ambush it, and you accept that wobble in the sight and you just squeeze through it, then 99% of the time it's going to be exactly where you want it to be. There's a few things that happen also that kind of makes you think that it's moving around a lot, and your focus should be on the sight pin and the target should be a little bit blurry. And that way I can see the sight pin perfectly clear. The sight housing is centered in my peep. Everything's exactly where I want it. And the target will be fuzzy behind it and you squeeze through it. When it looks like it's moving all over the place, it's because your focal plane is shifting from the sight pin to the target and back really fast, as in 100 times a second. And so as your focal plane is shifting back and forth really fast, it makes it look like the sight pin is moving all over the place because it's going in and out of focus quickly. And you have to understand that, and you have to accept that wobble. But as far as training for it, treat the very first arrow as the most important arrow that you have, and every single time that you shoot should be at a specific point. I don't shoot groups anymore inside of 40 yards because it gets you daggone expensive, replacing arrows, because you just start dropping them in one on top of the other. And I shoot a lot of broadheads, so I end up cutting fletchings off and splitting arrows and things like that just because I'm stacking them in one on top of the other. So I tend to shoot spots inside of 40, one arrow per spot. But again, you have to accept that wobble, and you can't jerk through the trigger squeeze. So most people shoot a gun on the tip of their finger when they're squeezing the trigger, and they do an index finger release for hunting, and they do the kind of the same thing. I tend to bury it a little bit deeper so that I don't have the dexterity that you have on the tip of your finger, but I know it's there, and I can make a small movement with my finger and allow it to fire. It's just one of the things that I do to try to take a lot of the guessing out of it, or take a lot of the potential problems in the form. It keeps me from punching the trigger. Same thing with the thumb. A lot of guys will rotate the thumb release in their hand as they're applying pressure, and as they rotate it, the pressure increases on the trigger on the thumb, and it fires that way. And you have other guys that shoot a hinge, which is back, using all back tension.
But I know one thing, Eddie, to tie right into this topic. I've talked with so many guys over the years, dude, in all shapes and forms, phone, private messages, trade shows, whatever. And everybody's always talking about buck fever. And for me, I always dealt with it when I think just experience for me has helped get rid of it to a certain extent. The other part for me is I'm always so focused on filming, especially when I'm self-filming. It almost distracts you to the point where all of a sudden the arrow's gone. You're like, holy crap, did I just do all that? I kind of go on just autopilot. But
right.
For guys, especially guys who are just getting into it, or maybe who have dealt with target panic on big bucks, whether you call it big buck or buck fever or target panic or whatever, we've all dealt with it. Even to this day, there are certain times, certain deer that just, man, they make me a mess. But other than just shooting your bow a lot, like you were talking about shooting individual points, and I think we all kind of grew up. And you go through those learning experiences in archery, but when you can group arrows together at a distance, it gives you confidence and it makes you feel like you're accurate and deadly. And so that's fun for a while until, like what you're saying, you start just blowing arrows. It starts to get very expensive. Now I do the same thing you do. Is I shoot one arrow at each distance, and I try to put everything back into practice like I hunt. And so that's my mindset year round. No matter what I'm doing, if I'm shooting my bow, I am doing it for the hunt. I'm not just I'm not out trying to have a 3-inch group at 1,000 yards or whatever. But any pointers to guys who maybe don't have the experience on how to build those fundamentals from the hunting standpoint, and maybe how to combat buck fever. Any suggestions you have from that standpoint?
One, don't try to overcomplicate things. Keeping things simple. I.e., going back to the fundamentals, and the you can shoot competitions, which provides some stress because you got a bunch of people watching. You can have even if it's just you and your friends, somebody filming you, so they're all watching. Somebody's filming. Or you can do something to tax your body so that, you've been, and I've been, and I still get excited. If I didn't, and I think you guys agree with me, if I didn't get excited, why am I doing it? So I get the same adrenaline rushes, but it's being able to cope with that. So that increased heart rate, the muscle twitching, all those things that come with the surge of adrenaline, because you're about to, execute the shot. You could, whether it's run, exercise, whatever it is, where you've taxed the muscle, you've increased the heart rate. There's already like a pre-stress on your body, and then have to execute that one shot. And 20 yards, okay, if you've never done it before, 20 yards works, but why not try to do that at 50 and 60 yards? And I know that other people say, well, I'd never take a 50-yard shot. That's fine. But being able to force yourself to work harder and holding yourself accountable, where I only have one shot, and I just did a 100-yard sprint, 50 push-ups, 100-yard sprint, 50 push-ups, and now I pick up and I shoot one arrow at 50 yards. And then,
I don't know if I would have made it through the second 50 push-ups, Eddie, to be honest with you.
But you see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
I do. Absolutely. I think that you're spot on, and I only say that because we moved this summer, Eddie. I'm not sure if you knew that or not, but we moved over to Wisconsin Dells, and we've got 90 steps to the river, and I don't know what kind of an angle is, but it's steep. Mm-hmm. So in an effort to get ready for climbing hill country, and in an effort to get ready for shooting my bow, since we are in the country, I'd go down 90 steps, up 90 steps, take one shot at 43 yards. It was an elevated position all the way back down the hill, so very much like a hunting situation. But I sucked at first. I'm much better today at it than I was back then, but I think that there's definitely something to if you're trying to duplicate a hunting situation, I think that's what you're talking about, having that stress on your body. There's no way to duplicate, your heart, pounding in your ear and that fire that you have when you've got a buck or whatever animal it is in front of you. There's no way to duplicate that. But I think what you're saying, if I'm correct, is the closest you can come is by physically taxing your body. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Physically taxing your body, and then again, if you can add in other things, like you've got, other people there that are watching, or you're at a competition. So before it's time to shoot, and again, I'm not a competition shooter, but I've been to 3D shoots, and you'll have people that'll look at you like you're crazy because you're not shooting at the stake at 23 yards. You ask permission, and you're going to shoot back at 55 yards because that's as far back as you can get. And then just before you shoot, like again, I train like I fight. I've got my binos, my rangefinder, my backpack, all that stuff on. Knock out, 10, 15, 20 push-ups, and then get up and be able to execute that shot within 4, 5, 6 seconds of coming to full draw. And people are like, well, you're an idiot. Well, okay, thank you.
You're an overachiever, Eddie. Let's just call it like it is.
He's like 20% guy.
They look at you and they go, you're not going to win. You didn't shoot on the stake. I'm not competing against you. I'm competing against me right now. I'm trying to get better. It's hard to get people to understand that.
Dude,
so if you can find the right like-minded people, it makes the experience so much more enjoyable because you'll find yourself pushing each other harder and harder and harder and harder. Be it the physical exertion or the distance that you shoot, you'll keep, the competition is going to make you better, no doubt. I'm sorry, what were you going to say, Todd?
Oh, just going back through all this. I start taking the pages back to when I first started hunting and all the different progressions that I made, and there's several other things in the topic of like being comfortable in a shooting position. You're talking about doing some crazy things, but I'll tell you, every single buck I've ever shot, usually, there's been a couple that were just textbook, but usually it's crazy angles, weird positions, unexpected situations that hunting out of a tree stand delivers because you've got 360 degrees or whatever of rotation around the stand that they can move through. There's a lot of things that can go on. And so years ago, I used to shoot from an elevated platform every shot for like 3 or 4 years when I lived in Michigan. I had a home that had a deck, and so I built a platform on it. And I got that muscle memory down to where I was used to drawing my bow and being in awkward positions and still then focusing for the most important last 2 seconds and letting it go. And to tie into that, the one thing that I think happens with so many archers, and I've been there, man. I think we've all been there, where you're at up in a tree. Here comes the big one. It's the big one, and he's coming in. Your body goes into freaking disaster control mode. It almost feels like, where it just wants to create an ending or a solution to that situation as quickly as possible. And I think that's when I really drew the line, when I was able to separate that too, and almost learn how to harness that energy that's happening at that moment and say, it's just another shot. I'm going to take my time, and I will make sure I wait for the right shot opportunity. And I think it happens to so many guys. You see it happen on video. You've heard it from every hunting buddy, especially guys who haven't been doing it very long. But it's hard to get to that point. But the only way you can really do it is just by doing it. So I think you can sit and talk about all this stuff, but man, you put yourself up in a tree stand and have a deer come in on you. It's like everything goes out the window. And it does become very personal. It's something that you have to kind of learn to conquer on your own. But I do definitely think that duplicating the unknown, like what you were talking about, shooting one arrow from this distance, whatever, put a tree stand up in your backyard, get up there, shoot awkward angles, because oftentimes the shots that you end up regretting are the ones that were the most slam dunk close range shots because you just didn't put the last 2 seconds into your routine. And I'm now at full draw. When I'm at full draw and I have my pin on a deer, I enjoy that one extra second. I make myself focus on the perfect shot. And that's all it is. It's like the last 2 seconds, man. And that ends up becoming what turns into a bad shot time after time after time again. And I think experience is a part of it, shooting is a part of it, but also talking about it and getting some ideas from other guys, to make it your own, so to speak.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's easy to sit here and talk about it, but what it really boils down to, I guess, from at least where I sit, is just a choice. And you've got to choose and harness the power of the decisions that you make, and understand that each time you make a decision that's detrimental or hurts the outcome of the desired goal, well, obviously that's bad. So at some point you need to make a choice to, am I right, Ed?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people that fall into that mindset of I've got to kill something, I've got to do it. Now, there's also additional stress of if you're trying to do a web show, a DVD, a TV show, and so guys will cut corners, and it typically ends up costing them. You've all seen the bad shots, and they're like, "Well, I thought he was going to leave, and I had to do it." And then, the background story is that if I don't get a kill for the show, now my worth to the company may not be as much. So there's that additional stress, but you have to be able, again, you have to be able to accept, you know what? I didn't get the shot off. I'm going to come back and do it again. What I did do is beat him at his own game. And if he got away, then I need to find another way to get back in on him and beat him at his game again, and this time get the shot off. So it's not defeat. It's just it didn't work out this time, so I'm going to take another opportunity.
I mean, it's not like in Eddie's case in his past career, if he made a mistake, he was dead. If you make a mistake in the field, it's not like the buck comes up and freaking gores you. But that, along with experience, as you kill a few bucks along the way, and that's, I mean, it's just kind of the transition, but that's what naturally starts to happen is you start to appreciate those moments and not put so much pressure on yourself to close the deal, because it is a wild animal. And I'll tell you, I've let enough arrows go in my early days where now I'll wait an extra second or two, and if I don't get the shot, I don't get the shot, period. Because I'll tell you, coming out of the field, thinking about the next hunt is so much more enjoyable than regretting a shot and potentially wounding and or killing that animal, not being able to recover them. Because at the end of the day, I can tell you this much: Eddie eats wild game just like the rest of us. He's not just going out there, for the death and destruction of it all. You're part of nature, man. And sometimes I think you gotta take a step back a little bit, and to just enjoy that moment. Don't put too much pressure on yourself. But yeah, I've had to give myself quite a few pucks at the bootstraps over the years to get myself up and, feeling down because of a bad blown out situation. And you just got to get back on the horse, get back up in that tree stand. You never know what's going to happen. But yeah, I think the one thing I really appreciate about Eddie more than anything is it's just his level of patience. And you hear some of the stories about some of the time he spent in deep holes overseas and all kinds of interesting situations. It's like, that's the one area of your expertise, Eddie, that I think nobody even thinks about, but the level of psychological analysis and evaluation that you had to go through to get that job, it certainly makes you a heck of an archery shot, a great hunter, and I would hope that you'd stand up on the national anthem too.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I do. I do.
I was wondering if that was going to come up.
Oh boy. Yeah. But I will say, I've asked Eddie several times over the years about different political things, and he's just like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect my job. But that's got to be a whole nother conversation, is just what you've seen from the political side, the bureaucracy, and dealing with, being a government employee, probably at some of the highest levels of security and things like that. And I would bet that being in your job with Trump in the office would make it a little bit easier than what the last 8 years have been, and or the several different campaigns before that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it is different. It's nice to have support and backing, which I don't think we had with the last administration. At least not to the degree that that was needed. But it's that whole thing. Everybody has the right to protest, but what are you protesting, and what have you done to rectify or to get involved with the situation that you're supposedly protesting? Or is it just a way to garner attention? But with all those people, I would first say, congratulations, you do have the right to protest. You do realize that you can't do that pretty much anywhere else in the world. So when you do get the opportunity to go outside of this country and see how other people have to live and the freedoms that they don't have, maybe you won't take what we have here for granted so easily. Because you go to, any of these other socialist dictator type countries and say, I don't agree with what's going on, and they slap the bracelets on you, and you're in the pokey just because you don't agree with the way something is said or done. You can complain about it here, but again, people don't understand the freedom that we have and what it took to get that freedom and to keep that freedom. But you go ahead and protest all you want. But, what exactly are you protesting, and what have you done to get involved with that problem that you've identified or that you have a disagreement with? And most of them, either one, can't tell you, or two, they're not willing to get, reach into their pocketbook and do anything about it. It's all about, garnering attention for themselves.
Well, it is a lot easier to get on your knee than it is to do something.
Yeah.
So anyway, truer words have never been spoken from our very own Eddie Valor.
Eddie Valor.
That's the nickname I gave him. He doesn't like it so much, though.
You had to get that in there, didn't you?
Good God.
Yes, I did.
Hey, I do have something for you, though, when you were talking earlier about, the missed opportunities and things like that. Think about all the accidents that you've either seen or been a part of, be it work, an accident's not necessarily where people got hurt or where you didn't get the chance to execute the shot is what I'm referring to as an accident. It's never really one thing. It's always a series of things that add up to you not being able to execute the shot or an accident being caused. And what that is a break in the routine. So if you're driving and you get distracted, you're answering the phone or you're talking to the kids or whatever it is, and boom, 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 there's an accident. Or you're in the tree and something breaks your routine, then, you screw something up. You don't get the right anchor point. You didn't let the pin settle. You had your finger in front of the trigger instead of behind the trigger when you were drawing. Little things like that. And so having that routine, which comes from just repetition, it's that muscle memory. Having that routine will alleviate a lot of that, or will put you in a position where you're not gonna make those small but critical mistakes.
Amen to that. And when you're in the wild, with all the different weather conditions that are going on in crazy tree stands, because I know not everybody hunts out of my perfect tree stands where everything is level within 2 degrees in both directions. the fact, I mean, everything's against you, but you kind of got to learn to love that aspect of it. And, I think that's where, and age and experience, I used to joke around about different projects and stuff that I'm working on. The unknowns used to drive me crazy. Now they're what I actually look forward to, because, I've seen a doe come running through the woods with a buck on her tail. I've seen a lot of cool things. So now I'm trying to more make it fun. And if you are having fun, I think it just makes the job a lot easier to do. But yeah, there's certainly a lot of aspects of all this that we're talking about that people will be able to relate to, some won't. But hopefully you'll be able to take something out of it, because I know just from the shooting standpoint and certain things about equipment, I've really learned a lot through Eddie, because he has a different way of looking at everything, which makes him a very interesting person to know. And I just appreciate your service, your friendship, and I'm glad you're alive, kicking, and training the new generation of ass kickers.
I appreciate that. Now, if I could just draw an Iowa tag.
Well, let's hear it. This is the best story we're going to tell you about Killer Eddie over here. What prevented you from going on your Iowa hunt last year, 2 years ago, Eddie?
Well, I had gone to, I'd been overseas doing some work for a while. I came back, and for the TV show, my video partner, Anthony Dixon, and I, we were going to Canada hunt mule deer. And then I found out I drew Iowa tags, and I also drew Montana elk, mule deer, and antelope. So I had spent 2 weeks in Montana, came back for a couple of days, and went to Canada for 2 weeks, and came back for a couple of days. Oh, and I had been overseas for a while before that. And my wife knew, and that I had drawn Iowa tag, and I said, hey, it's going to be a couple of weeks, and the rut's going to be kicking in Iowa. And she was like, and you're not going. So I ate those tags.
I had the whole place set up for Eddie to come hunt. I had some tree stands and stuff trimmed, and we were excited. And then I got the message. So it turns out even Rambo has to answer to Mama, just like the rest of us.
Yeah. I even tried to go after the ATA show, because I was already halfway to Iowa at that point, and just catch the last couple of days of late season, and that didn't fly. So I ate those tags.
Next time around we'll do it. We have been very successful up until this last year. We usually, Eddie and I do really good turkey hunting, or at least we kill something. This year was terrible conditions, so Eddie wasn't able to get a crack at one. But if you want to see some of Eddie's past shows with us, that he's always got an episode or two with myself during the turkey season, and just all around coolest dude I know. And he's actually legit. He's not full of it. I can guarantee you that much.
Well, there you have it, our conversation with Eddie. I hope that you all gained a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more insight on what to do to prepare. Even as the season goes on here, there's still time for you to train yourself and get better prepared for that moment of truth. Well, that's about all we've got for this week, with the exception of one thing. This week is our Ozonics giveaway. Here is what I need you to do. Go to our website in the top right-hand corner under the Contact Us button. Go ahead and fill out the Contact Us form and leave in the notes, send me my Ozonics. Go to our Facebook page or any of the social media outlets where this podcast is displayed, and go ahead and share that podcast. When you share that podcast, please be sure and tag Ozonics Hunting in the post where you share our podcast. That's about it. Pretty simple. Just go ahead and follow those instructions. And if you can't remember them, rewind this and listen to them again. Before I let you go, I need to remind you that we need to have your reviews on iTunes or Stitcher or wherever you listen to this podcast. If you do use an iDevice, grab your device and go to iTunes and search for the White Knuckle Podcast. This will help you to download the free podcast app, which is produced by Apple. When you subscribe to the show from within that app, every time I produce an episode, you'll get it downloaded right to your device. Essentially, on the Stitcher app for Android listeners, it's the exact same thing. And for those of you who don't have a mobile device, just click on the show within the link on one of our social media channels. That's about all I've got for today. Again, please leave us a review. Please enter in that drawing for the Ozonics prize package. The folks that have won them in the past have been nothing short of extremely excited about all the stuff that they've gotten. That's about all I've got. Jason out.